You must tell me all your secrets. Remember, we must share everything together. Everything.
They spoke of it first in whispers. Then it took the media by storm.
I have existed from the morning of the world, and I shall exist until the last star falls from the heavens. Although I have taken the form of Caius Caligula, I am a god.
Bob Guccione and Penthouse Films International present Caligula.
You amateur.
Amateur!
No treachery could equal his evil. No evil was more treacherous.
He's mad!
Caligula, the emperor who devoured Rome.
Growl! 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 I hate them!
Malcolm McDowell, Teresa Ann Savoy, Helen Mirren, Peter O'Toole, John Gielgud. No rumor can match the reality. Caligula, rated R.
Hello, and you're listening to Girls, Guts, and Giallo. As always, I'm Annie Rose Malamet, and today I'm joined by my really good e-friend, Mason Buck. Hi, Mason.
Hey.
So, Mason, I've shouted you out a few times on the podcast before. You're on Instagram as at the video hole, and you've allowed me to share your server with you, which is amazing, which is how I watched Caligula. And I just feel like this is our first time ever actually talking on the phone or anything, but I feel like we know each other already.
Yeah, I agree.
So, Mason, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, what you're about?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a video artist, freelance video editor, and I call myself an armchair film historian. Film and access to film is something that's always been really important to me, so I try to work a lot in getting films and getting screenings to people who might not otherwise have access to them.
It's such important work, and you also make these really amazing bumps at the beginning of your videos too, which I always really enjoy.
Yeah, I enjoy playing around. I've been teaching myself more motion graphics, and I like creating like retro style titles for movies on the server. It's a lot of fun.
And you're really good at it.
Thank you.
And today we're talking about Caligula.
Caligula. Oh my god.
Caligula. There's a lot to talk about here, so I guess we'll just get into it.
Yeah, let's dive in.
So, movie came out in 1979, directed by Tinto Brass, produced by Penthouse, more specifically by Bob Guccione, the founder of Penthouse. And he wanted to produce an explicit pornographic film with a feature film narrative and high production value.
He referred to it, I think it's important to point out, he referred to this as a Citizen Kane effort. Like that's what he
did.
thought.
Oh my God. Yes, I read that too. I actually read an interview with him in Penthouse. So he had his own fucking magazine interview him about the movie.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm just living for the fucking excess of this entire thing.
It's so, there's so much drama around this. Honestly, it's amazing that it actually managed to find its way into theaters. As much craziness has surrounded this production.
I know, it's crazy. It's like, how was this even able to see the light of day? When was the first time you saw it?
So, the first time I saw this was the edited cut, which takes out, I don't know, I feel like it's a good fifth of this movie is like literal genitalia shots.
It really
So the edited version is like just a little over 90 minutes, whereas the one that we watched, the uncensored one, is 2.5 hours. I saw that one for the first time when I was like 14. I was really young. And my favorite experience with this movie, though, is when I got moved to a different school in high school. I was trying to make new friends, and I had found this other weirdo who I thought we were going to be tight friends. And we were. But the first time we ever hung out, he came over to spend the night at my house. and we watched the uncensored version of Caligula.
Oh my god.
It was perfect. It was like the best way to get to know somebody.
I mean, the first time I saw this, I saw the uncensored version, and I had been reading about this movie for a long time because I was really into cult films when I was in high school, and
Oh
I
yeah.
read a lot of books about it and talked about it on message boards and stuff. But this was before you could get everything really easily, so I never was able to actually see it. And then I saw it for the first time in college, and I made all my roommates watch it, and they hated me.
I love it. That's basically the experience of like the theater goers in '79 who saw it.
Yeah, they're like, "What is this?"
The reaction of audiences to this movie is something in particular that I find really fascinating, because it seems like a lot of people who initially saw this in a theater were not prepared to have to sit through this intense pornographic content. So a lot of people leave the theater just mad and angry,
Oh,
and they don't know
I didn't
why.
know that. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
You have like, I feel like, and this is not based in anyone's actual like in like any of the writings of the people who saw it, but it does feel like there was a lot of repressed sexuality at the time that just could not like come to terms with what they were seeing on the screen. There's this great quote from this woman who saw it 6 times. She said it was her favorite movie, and every time she saw it with a different man, and every single time the men would say, "I hated the violence."
Oh my god. I mean,
Yeah.
she's an icon, number one.
Oh yeah.
Like, love her. This movie, I mean, the a lot of the big hubbub about this movie, if people don't know, it is that it was produced by Penthouse, and they cast actual Penthouse pets in unsimulated sex scenes. So it really is a fucking porno. Like, it's a porn with some highbrow
Yeah. Oh,
elements to it.
most of the sex in this movie is unsimulated. So I mean, I don't even know how many blowjobs there are in this movie. I should have taken count. But I think like
There's so many blowjobs.
yeah, I think like every 15 minutes you see a dick getting sucked. That's pretty common.
Yeah, there's a lot of blowjobs, and there's maybe like 2 scenes of cunnilingus. Huge gap.
During the production, so Gore Vidal, we haven't really said that yet, but Gore Vidal wrote the original screenplay for this.
Yes.
And titled it himself Gore Vidal's Caligula. In a number of interviews, he said it was so that he could maintain some control over the picture by having his name attached to it. But it all fell apart, and he sued to have his name to take it off of it.
Yeah, so Gore Vidal was hired to draft the film's script and Tinto Brass to direct, and Brass extensively altered Vidal's version, leading Vidal to ultimately disavow the film, like you were saying. And Gore Vidal wanted to focus on the idea that absolute power corrupts absolutely. That was really like the theme of it. But they disagreed on a lot of the sexual content because Brass refused to film all of the gay sex scenes that Vidal had
Apparently,
in the script.
there was only one heterosexual sex scene in Vidal's first version, and they didn't like it.
Yeah, so it's kind of like this weird thing where like Tinto Brass and Bob Guccione are obviously like these huge creeps who like wanted a bunch of Penthouse Penthouse pets in the film.
Yeah.
But then Gore Vidal is like all high and mighty about not having this pornographic film, but he had all these pornographic sex scenes. They were just between 2 men.
There's a quote from him where he actually said that he was okay with the pornographic content, but what he can't stand is filth. And there's so much filth in this movie. He said, this is the exact quote, "Sex doesn't bother me, but I can't stand filth."
Oh my God. So he's not one of us.
No. And like, there was also, as the production went on, Brass was eventually cut out of the editing process. And he ended up disavowing the film as well. I mean, the version that you see in 1979 that hits theaters for most audiences is Bob Guccione's vision that he pushed through all of these big names to make happen.
Yeah, so a lot of people who were involved with this completely disavowed the film. Apparently, they filmed like additional hardcore scenes that Brass didn't film, and he got weird about that.
Yeah.
And there was like a lot of legal issues when it came out. Interestingly, going off the filth thing, there is a film scholar named William Hawes, I think is how you pronounce it. And he wrote a book called Caligula, The Fight for Artistic Freedom. And he posits that the definition of pornography is that there's penetration and it's wet. And I think that that's a brilliant definition, which is absolutely what Caligula is. Like,
yes.
Gore Vidal is right. Like, it is filthy. Like, there isn't just sex scenes. Like, there are explicit. There's something about like the moistness of it too. It like makes it so gross.
I think this is the first like big movie I've ever seen that had cum in it, had a cum shot in it. There's a blowjob at one point, and the actress, or I guess the penthouse pet, actually spits the cum back on the guy's cock, like in the process of this fucking movie.
And it's like in the middle of a major plot point.
It's like that particular blowjob is actually being used as like this timing apparatus in the film. We'll get to it when we're going over the movie.
Yes.
There's a lot.
I mean, that's brilliant, actually. So the reviews were overwhelmingly negative. The movie was trashed, except for Malcolm McDowell's performance as the titular character Caligula and Peter O'Toole's performance as Tiberius. They were both praised. But how funny is it that they were in this movie? Like, I forgot Peter O'Toole was in this movie, and I lost it when I remembered that.
The reason that McDowell and Peter O'Toole and they were in it because of Gore Vidal. Gore Vidal's name was attached to it, and it looked like it was going to be this beautiful artsy feature. And turns out they all just ended up starring in a pornographic film. But there's a friend of mine at Cacophony Fox on Instagram. She went to a talk at the Screen Actors Guild by Malcolm McDowell, where he talked about the production of this movie and mentioned that Peter O'Toole was high most of the time. He would go off to his trailer and get stoned out of his mind and just show up on set. And they're like trying to film this movie, and while they're trying to deliver lines, he's calling out what he's seeing happening in the background. And he's like, is that two dwarfs and a woman splayed on a giant golden dildo?
So funny.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the lore of this film. It's just like legendary.
Yeah.
Something I found really funny was that the movie is now considered a cult classic, obviously, and Leonardo DiCaprio said that he based his character on the Wolf of Wall Street on Caligula in this film.
Well, I mean, what would Caligula have even been like if he had had Quaaludes? That's a great question.
Great question. Yeah. One thing I will say is like the elaborate sets and production design and the costumes and the jewelry, which were all done by Danilo Donati, who also did the makeup, are to die for.
They're amazing. And Donati's like designer royalty. He worked on Fellini's Satyricon, Roma, Amarcord. He worked with Rossellini, the Decamerons on Sallow. He also did Flash Gordon from the 80s and Red Sonja.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, this guy is amazing, and his work is incredible. It's really like, to me, it's one of the most standout things about this picture, once you get past the penises and vaginas, is these sets and these costumes are amazing. I would kill to have an orgy in any of those sets.
Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, like, the movie is hilarious in many ways. But I guess I'm also interested to know if you think that this movie is actually good. Like, what do you think of this? Like, because I found myself kind of captivated by the aesthetics of it.
The aesthetics of it are really one of the most compelling elements. I think, especially like now, 2019, this is the 40th anniversary of the release of it.
Oh, how apt! I didn't even know.
Yeah, it came out in '79.
That's right. Yeah.
So it has this entire mythos surrounding it that comes into play from the moment you start the movie. You feel like you're about to watch something you're not supposed to see.
Yes.
And there's a mystique to that, especially like, for you and me we were infected by it at a young age. The mystique of the forbidden movie or the banned movie. I think in that regard, it feels like even more of a spectacle than it was in '79 watching it now. And I love that. I really love that feeling, and I love that kind of connection to this movie. I don't think it's a good movie, but a lot of my favorite movies I don't consider good movies. I think it's a different it's a different distinction, and I think that this is an important movie, and I think it's well worth your time to watch this at least once in your life.
Oh, yeah. And I also honestly am here for the concept of a highbrow porn.
Oh, yeah.
I think about this all the time.
This is supposed to be the most expensive porno ever produced.
It's also the highest grossing ever produced. So I mean, I think about that a lot. Like when I watch some of my favorite higher brow movies, like not my sleazy movies. Yeah. I think like, wouldn't this be great if we could actually just watch these characters fuck though? Like maybe that's just me because I'm a fucking pervert, but I'm here for that concept.
No, I agree. I would love to see it. I mean, a lot of what we see as pornography is literally just designed to get you off. Like in whatever narrow context of getting off that is for the person viewing it. And I like that this movie had so many other agendas other than getting you off. There are so many other things it's trying to do, and it makes it really complex and meaty.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny too because everybody talks about the graphic sexuality, but there's also like really graphic violence.
And God, yeah,
insane amounts. And in this book that I read, a lot of William Haas's book on Caligula, he pretty much talks about how this movie is really unique because of the juxtaposition of the hardcore pornography and the violence. Like usually you just have one or the other. Yeah. But this movie, you have both in spades. And he also talks about how this is kind of the time when adult theaters were becoming more irrelevant because of the rise of VHS is going to happen soon. So it's kind of like the last dying gasp of the adult theater. And it's really interesting to look at it that way in a historical context.
Yeah. Guccione definitely saw this production in relation to avant-garde pornographic cinema. That's what he thought he was making.
Yes, I mean the rise of VHS was the death of avant-garde pornographic cinema. Like, yeah, but at the same time, William Haas says, and I kind of agree with him, that Caligula blurs the line so much between cinema and pornography that in a way it paved the way for the sexually graphic content of movies that we see today and how that's more and more acceptable. So, I mean, he wrote this book in 2008, so things have changed a bit, but I think I would say that that's partly true.
I would definitely agree with that. I think it's going to be even more interesting to see now that I mean, people have OnlyFans accounts. They have you can access someone's pornographic material in so many different ways. I really would love to see avant-garde adult cinema making a comeback now that you have movie making capabilities in the hands of almost anybody with a phone now.
That's actually a great point because I do see creators, porn creators doing like sort of avant-garde things. I just never see it getting like as much like the amount of traction I would want it to. So the other thing that was interesting, the comparison in the book that William Haas makes is he talks about the production of Caligula and compares it to pre-Hays Code silent era films depicting pagan revelry, such as films of like D.W. Griffith and DeMille. Like they had which Kenneth Anger documents in Hollywood Babylon, these really insane like orgiastic productions, which are legendary and which died out partly because of the Hays Code. So I thought that was also a really interesting comparison. It's like maybe this movie is even more old Hollywood than we think. Like there's tons of precedent for it.
I love the idea that it's in that same vein as like Griffith's Intolerance or something like that. It feels like it, especially with the grand scale of all of these sets.
Yeah, absolutely. So I also wanted to briefly, we'll get into the movie really soon, talk about Caligula the person, the actual person. Because this is, I believe, the first time on this podcast I've talked about a film that discusses somebody who existed in real life.
Yeah, word.
So Caligula was an emperor. I know you and I have also talked about this, about how we had like a slight obsession with mad Roman emperors.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Caligula, Nero.
Yes.
Still my heart.
I think Caligula might be my fave. I mean, he only ruled between 37 and 41 AD, and he was famous supposedly for being an insane sadist who ruled very briefly and was assassinated. And supposedly the first 7 months of his reign were blissful, but then he became ill and went insane. And the bulk of what we know about Caligula comes from ancient Roman historians that were writing like a century after his death.
Yeah, it's specifically two people. It's two historians writing over
Right.
a century after he died, and that's where we get a lot of that information. It sounds like by the historical count that when he was assassinated, there was a general attempt to just remove him from the record.
Right.
And kind of forget what I imagine we're going to do after Donald Trump leaves office and just try and like purge that from our minds.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, not a bad comparison.
Yeah.
But the sources are unreliable because, like you said, people were kind of trying to purge him, and also at the time, and I took a class in college about ancient Rome, but the professor would not let us talk about Caligula, which really bothered me.
Wow.
And I kept bringing it up. And I mean, he just kind of was like, we don't really know anything about him because sexual perversion and violence were often equated with bad governing. So that was something that historians would kind of make up to emphasize how corrupt these leaders were. And I mean, sure. I'm probably very little of what we know about Caligula is actually true, but I'm going to choose to believe it is because it's crazy, and I prefer it that way.
I love to think that all these horrible things happen. And historians love this, like, especially, like, I majored in history myself when I was coming up, and they really like to stay away from topics that we don't have definitive information about. And Caligula at this point is just, like, 90% myth.
Yes.
There's very little official record of what happened during his short 4-year reign.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Caligula is really more of like a symbol of things than he is any kind of real person. Although I think people, like maybe archaeologists, have kind of stumbled on what they think is his burial site. Kind of interesting.
Oh, I haven't heard that.
Anyway, let's talk about... And his name is really synonymous with, like, perversion, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I always joke about how, like, the straight people around me must just think I'm, like, an absolute Caligula. The way that I, like, talk about stuff. I am going to lean into that. So let's get into start now talking more specifically about the movie.
Yeah.
So... It opens in a pastoral pagan Rome with Caligula, played by Malcolm McDowell, chasing his sister Drusilla in a field. They're both basically naked, and this really recalls satyr nymph imagery, like right away.
It's so full of innocence and youth, and it's such like a happy, light beginning to this story we're about to dive into.
Yeah. And Prince Caligula, who's called Little Boots, which Caligula means little boots. That was his nickname in IRL.
Yeah. As a little like backstory for that, Caligula was the son of Germanicus, a famous Roman general. And when Caligula was just a little lad, he had a suit of armor made for him that his father had commissioned that made him look like a tiny little Roman soldier. And so everybody got in the habit of calling him Little Boots because of this costume, and that's where that comes from.
Wow, so quaint. It's just like such a weird thing that we know about him that's like not lost to time.
I think it's because it's related to Germanicus. Germanicus, his father, was a hero in Rome. That's one of the reasons that Caligula's reign started off so triumphantly. This is the son of Germanicus. He is beloved by the Roman citizens. His father could do no wrong in the eyes of Roman citizens. So when he comes up for the first time, everyone's really excited about that fact.
Oh, that's yeah. That I didn't know that. Amazing. So the entire Prince Caligula is summoned by the Emperor Peter O'Toole, and the entire atmosphere already when he enters the Emperor's sphere is one of excess and hedonism. And this was something Emperor Tiberius, he was also written about as being like a big sexual pervert. So
yeah, he was definitely a hated tyrant. At this point, I don't think they expressly state it, but when he goes to sea and live with Tiberius, he goes to the Isle of Capri. He's not actually in Rome anymore. Tiberius has taken refuge on the Isle of Capri and rules from there because he's so fucking hated.
Right, and weren't Caligula and his sisters? He actually had 3 sisters, but only one of them is in the film.
Yeah.
Weren't they like they're like his prisoners, basically, glorified prisoners?
Tiberius is, yeah, they are. Caligula's not actually Tiberius's grandson. Tiberius, as part of Augustus Caesar's attempt to set up the lineage before he dies, he makes Tiberius adopt Germanicus. Germanicus is so popular that it makes Tiberius even popular, having adopted him as his son, which makes Caligula his adopted grandson. And he never wants Germanicus to take power. He doesn't want Caligula to take power. So he basically holds them as prisoner on Capri, and forces them to stay with him. And this is when we also see historically there that Caligula begins torturing people while on the Isle of Capri, joining in the debauchery that Tiberius has started.
Yeah, there are accounts of people saying, "Oh, he was always cruel because when he was in Tiberius's realm, he was, participating in all of the torture."
Yeah.
So I was really struck immediately. Like, I haven't seen this in a long time, and I know we've talked about how pornographic this is. There's so much nudity. Like, it's the essence of this film. And I was also wondering, and this is a question we can think about as we talk about the rest of the movie, does this movie operate from a place of Christian morality? Like, I feel like there's a lot of, because, I mean, I'm sure a shell of what Gore Vidal had originally written, but it seems like there is there's a lot of moralizing about the behaviors that take place in this movie. Like, it's definitely at its core an exploitation film in a lot of ways, and it exploits sexuality and revels in it, but it also is equating sexuality with violence and corruption. So that's just something I wanted to think about as we talk about it. And
I think that's a really good point. We'll come back to that. There's a lot that feeds into that idea.
Yeah, also, like, aesthetically, like, the Emperor's domain, Tiberius's domain, is really ominous and dark. And
yeah, there's a lot of deep crimson colors.
Yes,
like it looks. You know what? It actually, the first thing that it reminded me of was the clay wall from Videodrome, where you see the women being abused. There's like this deep red crimson clay wall that you see, like, with these women being beat on in Videodrome, and that's immediately what I thought of when I saw Tiberius's set.
That's a great comparison. And Peter O'Toole, Tiberius, is bathing in this giant pool with his hundreds of what I assume are wives and children and concubines.
Yeah, little fishes he calls them.
And he says, "Come, my little fishies."
He's also, it's interesting to note that he's covered in lesions too. Like, he is decrepit and old and falling apart.
Well, he's
like
covered in lesions. Like you,
Yeah.
maybe I misheard you. Is that what you said? Lesions.
That's what I said. I said lesions.
Yeah.
It-
And I mean, it's a bit too early for this historically, but we're coming up on the AIDS crisis.
Yeah, like a couple years away from it really hitting
Yeah.
full swing.
Right. And it's, I don't know. I mean, of course, they did not predict that, but viewing it in retrospect, of this like decaying person, this like sexual pervert with all these lesions, and apparently Tiberius did die from venereal diseases, or like that's what they say. Who knows if that's true?
There's all kinds of rumors about his death, which they go into in the movie a little bit too.
Right. So it's really outward ugliness is really being equated to inner ugliness here.
Oh yeah, like you get the sense that all of his horrible debauchery has somehow led him down this path of decay, and slowly falling apart. Like
Yes.
like he's been paying for his sins.
Yes.
To go back into your Christian morality argument.
Right. And I mean, Peter O'Toole is hilarious. Like, I forgot how funny he was. I mean, it's not supposed to be funny, but.
He almost instantly tries to poison Caligula, which I
Yes.
found hilarious.
And he forces him to do a dance.
Oh yeah, his weird like little thumbs up dance that he does.
Yes. And he accuses Caligula of wanting him to be dead. And he tells Caligula he's dying. And Caligula insists, no, you're a god. And the emperor dismisses it. And the emperor leads Caligula into this other room, this other red room. It looks like hell, honestly.
Yeah.
And it also kind of is set up in this very stage-like play way. And the room is basically an elaborate BDSM dungeon where people are being punished and pleasured. And there are human statues.
And there's like there are deformed people too. At one point, you see having sex. There's all sorts of like weird looking people having sex. It's the only time you actually see that sort of aesthetic in the movie. Like there's no other aesthetic of ugliness and sexuality. The rest of it is portrayed as very beautiful.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there's a lot of, and I guess, I mean, that's supposed to highlight how corrupt he is. And I don't know, the people with deformities, I feel like there is a, kind of point of abjection and horror.
Yeah.
Which people with deformities are used a lot in film historically for.
That's not surprising at all, especially as Tiberius is aging and falling apart. It would make sense that he'd want to have people who looked quote unquote worse than him to make him feel better.
It's a good point. And we get also the first of the famous unsimulated orgies.
Yes.
And some really great kink aesthetics going on here. And it looks like an absolutely chaotic Bosch painting. Like,
oh yeah, that's a great reference.
Yeah, just people like fucking, and people look weird, and it's just insane. And also, like I told you, I was watching this with my mother for some reason.
Did she? You told me that. So you started this forgetting that it was like hardcore porn. Did your mom say anything?
Yeah, she was like.
Did she say like I can't do this?
No, she was like, oh my god. And I mean, I watch a lot of stuff with my mom, but I was like, okay, no, we can't watch this together. I like cut it out. My mom was like, oh, and I was interested. And I'm like, oh no, I can't watch it with you, Mom.
Oh my god. That's great.
Tiberius brings out Caligula's brother, Gemellus.
Yeah, he's I can't actually remember his lineage. He's not like actually his brother. He's another adopted heir.
Right.
He's not actually in line to take the throne at this point. Gemellus.
Right. And he tells him, when I die, Caligula will kill you, and then someone will kill Caligula.
Facts. Those are
Right.
just facts.
Facts. Caligula is, now we see him in bed with his sister, who he has an incestuous relationship with, which is also a big part of his lore, Caligula lore.
Oh, I do want to, real quick, I want to go back. There's this moment that I found really telling of the whole movie when Tiberius has caught, during that scene where they're in his pleasure palace, Tiberius has caught one of the soldiers getting drunk or something. So
Yes.
he asks Caligula, like, does this man look drunk to you? And Caligula's like, no. And he has him force-fed wine. They tie his cock. They actually see them tying like a little string around his cock, and then they start force-feeding him wine.
Yeah.
And
Kinda
after
hot.
he's like, yeah, after he's like drunk and falling down, he's stabbed by Tiberius. And there's actually a story from Malcolm McDowell where Peter O'Toole is doing this take high as a kite, and he takes the sword when he's supposed to stab him, and he actually knocks the actor out. And he's supposed to hit a goat bladder that has like a bunch of innards and things in it, so there's blood. He misses it and ends up just like lobbing it onto the floor, and it bounces around as like a complete goat stomach, while this actor is passed out from being knocked out.
Oh
by Peter
my
O'Toole.
god. So funny. I'm
Yeah.
so glad you know about that.
Okay,
So,
back.
but Caligula is having an incestuous relationship with his sister, who's assuring them that he will be emperor. And a bird gets trapped in their room, and Caligula freaks out and is afraid
Yeah.
of it as if it's this omen. And the bird appears later at the end of the movie, too. Nerva, who I'm assuming is Tiberius's like right-hand guy or something.
Yeah,
ahead.
Nerva's a consul. Played here by John Giegland, who was another one of the big names in the production at the time.
Yeah, he was a more highbrow actor.
Yeah, he had done a lot of like Shakespearean adaptations. He was in Prospero's books in '91 that came out later. He did Gandhi in '82. He was a pretty highbrow actor who played Nerva.
Playing Nerva, and he commits suicide in a tub of water and portends doom for Tiberius and Caligula.
That scene, I love that scene. 'Cause
It's a good
The tub of
scene.
water that he's in is like, it looks like a giant pool with a clear glass front, and you're seeing it from the front on. Like you were saying earlier, a lot of these sets, first off, are gorgeous, but have this very theatrical tableau appearance. And the death of Nerva, just all the shots in that, to me, they feel like Renaissance tableaus.
Yeah, and it also looks like the neoclassical painting "The Death of Marat," where he's committing suicide in the tub.
Absolutely.
And Caligula taunts him as he's committing suicide, and Nerva says there is nothing after death. There's nothingness. There's no gods, just sleep. And this enrages Caligula, and he drowns him.
Yeah, he doesn't even let the man choose his own death. Takes him out in the end.
Yeah. Caligula, after this, has frenzied visions of torture that he's fantasizing about. That's an interesting scene where you see a bunch of people like swinging around from the ceiling, like underneath some kind of giant saw. I wonder if
Envision them
they
being killed.
right. I wonder if they had like actual like people who are in the kink scene tying people up and stuff in this.
I wonder how much of Penthouse Bob Guccione brought over to this production. Like Penthouse stylists, Penthouse photographers. Who was working on this? All we know about really are the pets.
Yes. And a lot of them are like nameless.
Yeah.
Caligula is anxious for the emperor to die. Macro, what role is Macro? I was a little confused because there's so many characters. So Macro seems to be part of the Praetorian Guard.
Yeah, Macro is, at this time, is the head of the Praetorian Guard, and in the earlier scene where he's in Tiberius's pleasure dome, Tiberius specifically warns him about Macro to watch out for him because Tiberius doesn't even trust him.
Right.
And with good reason. 'Cause
Yeah.
here comes Caligula, and Macro completely condones the killing of Tiberius by Caligula.
Right. Macro also assures Caligula he's going to be emperor soon, and him and Caligula kisses him forcefully for an extended period of time. That's right. So we do get some gay stuff in this movie.
We also see Macro putting his fist into the fire pit as a sign of devotion to Caligula.
Yeah, I
which
mean,
it's a weird mask flex.
Yeah, yeah. Macro is a cuckold also, whose wife is getting fucked by Caligula.
Oh my god. I guess we'll get to the scene in a minute with the semen facial.
Yeah. This was also in Tacitus's account of Caligula, so apparently this was a lot of this movie is really heavily true to his historical accounts of him.
Well,
Caligula steals Tiberius's ring while Tiberius is like passed out in a fever, and he wakes up and demands his ring back, but Caligula refuses, and Macro kills Tiberius for Caligula. He smothers him.
Caligula actually he in a fit of like whatever you want to call this, he picks up a mirror because he's ready to bash his head in. But Macro comes in all cool because clearly Macro has thought about it. He's like, no, let's strangle him. It's going to be less bloody.
Yeah.
More real.
Yeah, and this is something that is also in the historical accounts multiple times, like Macro killing Tiberius for Caligula. And there's like a big theme here of old power being overcome by new perverts coming up in the game, Tiberius.
Yeah, the passing of the perverted torch.
Yes, exactly. At the succession ceremony, Caligula appoints Claudius as his counsel, who's a fat femme gay, in my mind. I mean, he really is.
Have you ever seen the BBC I, Claudius adaptation?
Years ago.
It's really, I really love that one. But in that one, of course, like Claudius is like an unspoken genius, whereas in this, he's very like, he is a femme idiot, like clown. He fills a lot of really weird roles in this production. He's always heavily made up too. He's one of the only characters who is so heavily made up. He's usually wearing more makeup than the women when you see him on screen.
And he's always just like giggling. He's messy. He's really messy. Caligula also appoints his brother Gemellus as his heir. And Caligula wants all of Rome to swear, not just by him, but also by his sister Drusilla. And that causes a stir.
Yeah, he names her consort specifically, which is really controversial.
Later that night, Caligula says to Drusilla that he can do anything he likes to anyone. And that is a huge theme of the movie.
Yeah.
He will prove that throughout the rest of the plot.
He says it to people all the time. It's like something that amuses him to think to himself, like, oh, I could have everybody here killed if I wanted right now. He thinks it's funny.
Yes. This red and blue bedroom they're in, though.
Oh,
amazing. It's so gorgeous. And that bizarre, statue relief peephole. With
the mouth?
Yes.
Yeah. With the pursed lips, and then behind it you see the gay blowjob happening.
You said gay blowjob. My next note was literally just the words gay blowjob.
That's literally what mine's gay blowjob discovered.
Yes. Yeah, he looks through the peephole and there's a gay blowjob happening.
I think it's one of the only times actually in this version that you see man on man. There's another one coming up, but it's not quite as mutually pleasurable as this particular scene we stumble upon.
Right. Caligula uses his brother basically to pin Macro for the murder of Tiberius. And he's also wearing a fabulous red velvet outfit.
Yeah. Oh, he looks gorgeous.
And this it's so funny because I'm sure in Gore Vidal's original script, obviously it was a lot gayer. And Caligula, there are vestiges of that in the film. Like, Caligula is kind of queer coded, even though he clearly is into women.
Oh yeah,
He's
there's
very fab.
agreed. He definitely skates that line, which I find really delightful in the course of this movie. There's no like, there's no like this. There's no real like classic masculine coding. I feel like for Caligula, like he really skirts between gender roles throughout this, and I love it.
I love it too, and I celebrate that. And I'm also skeptical because he is supposed to be evil, and you know, so often queerness
queers are the
is
evil
so
ones.
right, exactly, and the contrast between him and Macro. Macro is kind of like more classically masculine, and we see him.
I agree completely. I think
Yeah.
it's a case of like we want to uplift these like queer characters, or at least like in dialogue. I don't really want to like uplift Caligula too much, but at the same time, it does look like this was a plot device to make him seem extra evil or extra perverted.
Right.
This
Exactly.
queer side of him, yeah.
Right. So Caligula goes to see. Is her name Elia?
Enya.
Enya, like the singer.
Enya. Yeah, spelled different, but it's pronounced like the same.
Yeah.
She's the
And-
wife of Macro.
Macro's wife, and she's being rubbed down with cum.
There's a bunch of like naked dudes around her, like coming into like a giant chalice, and then she's using it as like a facial. Quite literally.
It's insanity. And Caligula suggests that they go to Egypt to marry and declares that he is Rome, and he takes a piss on a column. Iconic. The
He can piss
Senate,
wherever he wants.
right. But he does inform Enya that the Senate has sentenced Macro to death, and Enya is distressed, and Caligula
She spits in his
banishes
face.
her what?
She spits in his face after he says that.
Yeah, she spits in his face, and Caligula banishes her to Gaul. And Caligula also insists to Drusilla that they are going to get married, even though they're brother and sister. And he also suggests that they go to Egypt so that they can get married because incestuous relationships were apparently accepted there.
She doesn't want him to. Like, I think she's an important steadying influence for him for much of the film. They really show her as being more level-headed than Caligula, and she's literally the only person that he'll listen to.
Yes. And it's because she's an extension of him, and he's a narcissist.
Exactly.
So, I wonder why they left out his other sisters, though.
I don't know. They don't. Well, his other brother, he had brothers, but I think they were all killed before the events of the movie would have started. But yeah, I don't know about the sisters. I'm assuming they just left her in because she's the one that he was rumored to have the relationship with.
Yeah, and apparently also it's written that he like forced her to live as husband and wife. But
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, but in this movie it's very consensual.
I don't know why I would assume it's consensual. Like, how much of this stuff is ever consensual in ancient Rome?
Yeah, ancient Rome is not known for its feminist sensibilities. So Drusilla, though, like you said, is a very grounding influence, and she insists that he marry a respectable Roman woman.
A lady of senatorial class.
Yes, maybe one of the priestesses of Isis. And
So then they go to the priestess orgy.
yes, they go to a all woman orgy, the priestesses of Isis ritual, and Caligula is in drag.
Yes, I love it.
And this moment is just so queer. Like, everything about this, like Caligula in drag at this lesbian orgy. And apparently this was another thing that was written about in accounts of Caligula, that he did used to go in drag and go to so he could like sneak around and
I didn't know.
yeah, so I mean, very loaded
Yeah. And in this scene-
symbology there.
he's trying to figure out. He's there with Drusilla, and they're trying to figure out who he's going to marry. And the first person he points to is this girl, Livia. And Drusilla's first comment is, "She's a virgin. You wouldn't like her. And she's promised a Proculus anyway." And he says, "Well, that doesn't matter. I can just have him sent away."
Yes.
He ends up picking out Helen Mirren's character, Caesonia. That's the one that he wants then. And Drusilla tries to get him off of Caesonia by saying she's the most mischievous of all of them. She's extravagant and in phenomenal amounts of debt, which
And
Caligula just
promiscuous.
finds. Yeah, Caligula just finds that attractive.
Yeah, he says perfect. And my note here is, wow, what a mood.
he ends up fucking her in drag.
Yes.
At the end of that scene.
Yes, he cuts her neck and licks the blood.
And then it cuts to the decapitation wall, which is probably my favorite set.
Oh, which I forget which one you're talking about.
There's actually like a really sharp cut from them having sex to a man's head being buried in the ground, being cut off by a giant spiral blade. And there's
Yes. Oh, yes.
You pull back to this giant. There's this space which kind of looks like it could be just some kind of amphitheater or something. And there's this giant 3-story, maybe 30-yard long red wall with half-naked soldiers on it. And it has these spiral blades at the base of it that are cutting off the heads of people buried in the dirt.
And Macro is one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like really fucking gruesome. There are people pelting apples at the heads of the people who are down there, just seeing if they can hit them real quick before they go.
Yep.
And then we get a line that I think is really important for Caligula. That tells us a lot about how he thinks. After he sees a bunch of heads cut off, he says, "If only all Rome had just one neck."
I love that line.
Like, your goal here is to govern this gigantic, massive empire, and his first thought is, if only I could destroy the whole thing.
I mean, chaos demon, 100%.
Very much.
What did you call that? Was this a killing device that actually existed? Do you know?
I don't know, and I doubt that it did. But then again, there are all these reports, especially when you read about the Colosseum, and you find out they used to flood the Colosseum with water and have naval battles on it. So
Yes.
I wouldn't doubt that at some point there was a giant movable wall of decapitation that existed. But
This was one of the most impressive things in the movie to me. Was this killing machine?
it's like, it's kind of awe-inspiring. It's so huge. The fact that there's just people standing on it too, like rows of people just standing in these little carved out alcoves, almost
Like
as decoration.
statues. Yeah.
Yeah, like living statues.
It's insane.
It's one of the images that, for me, has stays with me longest.
Yeah, it's really impressive. I wonder how they managed that, like the construction of that. It's really fascinating.
I wonder that too. It's because it's literally moving. It's literally like 3 stories tall and it's moving forward slowly.
Yeah, and
It's wild.
that line, "If only Rome had just one neck," I love that line. I
Yeah.
wonder if that's like that sounds like something that might have been in an actual account of him. But who
that could be.
knows? So, I mean, somebody knows, just not me. And
I don't know.
and now my next note is, and now the grossest food orgy ever filmed. It's this food scene. They're at a wedding.
This is the wedding of Proculus and Livia. Livia
Yes.
is the virgin priestess he originally had his eyes on.
Yeah, and it sort of reminds me, because I just watched The Dark Crystal, it really reminds me of like how the Skeksis feast.
Oh my god, yes.
And also that scene in The Company of Wolves when they're at the feast and they turn into werewolves.
Oh
Like-
yeah, I think that's a really good one.
The just grotesque nature of it. And Caligula wants to fuck the bride.
He doesn't just want to fuck the bride. He says it's his gift to the couple.
Yes. And so he takes them into this other room, and a big theme in this movie is like cuckolding, cuckolding is used so much in film.
It's a really big power play in this scene.
Yeah. And Caligula rapes the bride and makes Proculus watch.
Mm-hmm.
And then he rapes Proculus with his fist while the
sticks
wife watches.
There's like a jar of lard or something, and he just shoves his fist into it and then slams it into Proculus's ass.
This is, it's so disturbing. And he takes his fist out and it's like covered in blood.
He's got the ring on it. He's got that imperial ring on it that he took from Tiberius that he shoves up there.
Yep. They didn't go so far as to actually show us a man fisting another man. It's really just implied.
Why stop there? Why is that a boundary?
I know, right? That's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, that's the boundary. They
just go for it.
Yeah. And Caligula, he has the next time we see him, Caligula is having a fit in the rain, screaming about how his little brother Gemellus is going to kill him. Yeah. And he's comforted by Caesonia and Drusilla. They initiate a threesome with him. And
how sweet! Just a nice little like threesome with your wife and your sister.
It's very tellingly the most wholesome sex scene in the movie. And also there's some nice good old fashioned unsimulated lesbian sex happening behind that peephole.
Yeah, I love it. They like full on vaginal views, fingers going in everywhere.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's a legitimately sexy scene.
It was pretty hot, yeah.
I also noticed there was a huge contrast here because the penthouse pets have unsimulated sex, but of course the legit actors don't. So you never actually see that any of the major actors in this movie have sex or any kind of sex scene.
The pets are kind of brought in as like sexual ringers. Like, we want to see some hardcore shit. Let's cut to some pets.
Yep.
That could have I wouldn't be surprised if that was one of those scenes that they filmed after the fact just to have more hardcore pornographic content.
I would not doubt it. It seems very tacked on.
Yeah.
And I was also thinking about at this point this huge contrast between having porn actors and Hollywood actors in the same place. And when do we ever see that? Like this is very unique to this movie. And I was thinking the only example I can think of are like actresses who left porn and started doing film, like Sasha Grey, or Tracy Lords. Like, you never really see like active porn actors in the same film as Hollywood actors.
The only time I've seen it was Sean Baker's Starlet.
Yeah, I remember that now. Yeah. Yeah, and or like or the Lindsay Lohan movie The Canyon.
I didn't see that one.
Oh god, it's such trash. You should watch it. You would
I'm definitely going to now. You said Lindsay Lohan,
would,
and then a movie
you
I
would
haven't
enjoy
seen.
It. Yeah, you would enjoy it. I mean, it stars James Dean and Lindsay Lohan.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I'm surprised you haven't seen it. So Caligula has his brother Gemellus arrested for treason. It was only a matter of time.
Yeah.
And Helen Mirren, Caesonia, dances in an insane metal bra. I just had to put that in there because it's crazy.
And that fake baby bump.
Yes.
Which is so noticeable when they first show her taking off her cloak to reveal her dancing attire. Because it just looks like a plaster stomach.
Yeah. Caligula falls ill. And is this okay? I'm confused because there's another person that looks like Claudius but is maybe not Claudius. Claudius offers his life for Caligula and Caligula accepts. Like he's Go ahead.
I remember thinking the same thing in that scene when he's like, Caligula's down of a fever and someone who looks just like Claudius like makes this grand gesture where they say, "Take my life, Jupiter, and spare his." And of course, Caligula instantly is like, "Okay, have him executed."
It's so funny.
That's one of the things in the accounts too. And apparently there's multiple people who he had executed after the fact for offering themselves up.
Yep. so funny. I mean, there's actually like a lot of moments of genuine humor in this movie. Like the next scene where Caligula is stamping a bunch of proclamations, and he has to like say the same thing every time he
Yeah.
stamps it, and he starts doing it really really fast in like a frenzied way, and it's actually very funny. And I think it's supposed to be funny.
It's hilarious. It's hilarious that every time he's encountered with actual duties of the Emperor of Rome, he can't do them. He has no patience for them whatsoever, and would rather turn to having people killed and giant orgies
Yes.
instead of actually doing his duties.
So now we see Proculus again, this poor man, hanging from the ceiling with women hanging off of him. And he's like, Caligula's like having him tortured, basically. And he's like, "What did I do, Emperor?" And Caligula says something insane, which I didn't get word for word, but he basically says, "You're a loyal man, and therefore not Roman, and therefore a traitor."
Yeah, he doesn't equate those qualities with being Roman, so therefore Proculus is a traitor for being loyal and honest.
Ridiculous. Yeah. And Caligula tortures him and executes him.
And then he gets pissed on by the women.
Yes. That is an insane scene, by the way. Like,
Yeah,
it's
unsimulated pissing.
Yes. I mean, a lot of this stuff is not shocking to me because I've seen plenty of porn.
Yeah.
But it's shocking I'm still shocked by it in the context of such a highbrow movie.
How cool would it be to like be in a theater and sit opposite everybody else in 1979 and just watch their faces as they're watching this movie?
Yes.
Just seeing what's coming across people's faces as they're being horrified and disgusted and even maybe reviled by their own desires.
Yeah, the pissing thing was crazy. I mean, I completely forgot about that. And I mean, I think this was like their showgirls, honestly. This is their showgirls. Like, they thought this was going to be, I don't know. I mean, maybe they didn't also, because Bob Guccione he did his own rating system with it. Like, he refused to let it be rated X.
Oh, yeah. He said that X was an insult to the movie, and he wasn't going to let the MPAA do that.
Right. So, Caligula makes Helen Mirren give birth in an insane manner.
This is the most amazing birth/wedding ceremony I've ever seen. Also the only birth/wedding ceremony I've ever seen.
Yeah, she's like tied upright as she's giving birth.
She's elevated above everyone. She's on essentially a stage and then elevated even to the top of the stage as like almost like a goddess figure.
Yeah, like
birth.
a statue.
Yeah.
And she's got this mask on and she's giving birth in this position.
You literally see the baby crowning, which I'm guessing is not
see the baby
real.
crowning.
That must be simulated.
It has to be, but there's just like, what don't we see in this movie? I mean, there's also like graphic birth. I mean, it's crazy. He names the baby after his sister. But shortly after, Drusilla dies, and Caligula is absolutely bereft, and he sexually defiles the corpse. So
he kisses her. It's really, because throughout the movie he of course refers to himself as a god because he has been raised to believe that he is of divine right, and he actually seems surprised that his affections don't bring her back to life.
Yes. Yeah, he's like kissing her body, like touching her breasts, and yeah, she's that's a really excellent way to look at it. Like the way he's acting is like just so horrified that he doesn't actually have any powers here in the face of death. Yeah,
he can't do shit about it.
He decrees public mourning for a month, so anyone who does anything basically will be sentenced to death. So no laughing, no bathing, no intercourse.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also interesting because Caligula wanders around among the common folk in disguise. So this is another time he's in disguise.
And it's fucking filthy out there. Like there's like a good 5 or 6 people you see squat what is squatted down, pissing against like a wall while he's walking around.
There's a man with a giant penis hat.
Yes. Fuck yes.
And just everybody's like covered in grime and filth. He sees a play that's being put on about what a joke he is.
Yeah.
The play is really interesting. There's like this giant pyramid and the pyramid structure, and the narrator of the play is having first the slaves are on the bottom, and then the common people, and then the Praetorian Guard, and then then it goes up and up until we get to the top of the emperor. And there's an actress that comes out who's playing Drusilla, and she's like kind of this hideous hag figure. And she's like, "Oh, brother, come to me." And this is what sets Caligula off. And he attacks the actors and accidentally gets rounded up as a common prisoner.
Yeah.
Because they think he's just like a madman.
They
And
definitely don't think he's the emperor.
No. And no one at court knows where Caligula is because he's in prison. And everyone in this filthy prison, people are still fucking.
Oh yeah, there's a woman who is in the lap of who I guess is her pimp, and he's taking some kind of payment to allow people to touch her.
Yes.
It's a weird scene.
It's so weird.
That's also when he meets I don't know if it's a jailer or if it's just somebody in there who ends up recognizing him by his ring. And he takes him with him when he gets out of prison.
Yes.
He stays with him for the rest of the movie. This
Yeah, he's like his little pet.
Yeah, this weird little like prison guard barbarian guy.
And Caligula is also watching all of the debauchery of the prison in horror as if he doesn't do the same filthy shit.
Yeah.
Which I found very funny.
Maybe he was astounded that it was happening during the time of mourning. Maybe that's what it was. Like they should.
Good point.
They should all know.
He gets in a magic trick battle with this brute. The one who recognizes the ring you were talking about. And it was unclear to me how exactly he gets out of prison. But he's back at court. And he's covered in filth because he just came from this prison. I just have, that Roman prison looks like absolute hell on earth. It was just dirt.
It was dirt. It was dirt, dark. There's a little bit of straw.
Horrible.
People get in there too. I love it. They throw people in there down a giant chute. They land on a pile of straw.
Yeah, and I mean, just the thought of an actual ancient Roman prison is enough to chill my bones. I don't even want to think about it. Knowing some of their bathing practices, for example, how they used to wipe their ass with a sponge at the end of a stick that they would just rinse out.
Oh.
Ugh, it's horrible. Caligula's back at court ranting about how he's a god. I said my other note is Claudius is here, and didn't that guy get executed? But maybe that was another fat femme person.
I think that's just another one of those fat femmes.
Yeah, that's just around in the court. The Senate declares him a god, and Caligula makes everyone baa like a sheep to demonstrate how he controls everyone and everything. And the next scene, Caligula, oh God, he's talking about how they need money, and who makes the most money? A pimp. Mm-hmm. And who are the sluttiest women in Rome?
The senators' wives.
Why, the wives of the senators, of course. So he unveils something. He's already started having this imperial brothel where the senators' wives are prostitutes, and this epic orgy scene ensues. Seriously epic orgy.
It's on a giant indoor ship that has oars. And it's the idea of it is that it's heading to Britain, which has yet to be conquered by Rome. So they're all heading to Britain on this giant ship, this giant brothel ship, which is indoors. It doesn't actually go anywhere.
It's indoors, yes, and there are also like soldiers doing a very gay dance among the oars.
I love the dance.
It's so good. The extended blowjob scene.
There's a number of blowjobs, but this is the one where we get the cummy blowjob, which is a timing apparatus for the end of the scene, because it builds between these cuts. They keep cutting back between this epically gigantic cock being sucked and these soldiers prancing about at the base of the ship. And it ends with an actual cum shot.
Yeah, actual cum shot. I was just like watching this mouth agape because I just, I've seen a lot of gross stuff, and I think I just forgot how epic this was.
Yeah.
Like how, because I kind of always think of 70s porn as like kind of wholesome and tame. And to see something so outrageously hardcore
was it's so
pretty
hot.
interesting.
It was so hot too, let's be real.
It is, I mean, let's be honest. Like it's
not all the
it's
sex,
a hot orgy.
Not all the sex in this movie is hot, but this orgy on this ship was real hot.
Yeah, it was. Because everybody looks like they're really enjoying themselves. I think that's why.
The only people who aren't enjoying themselves are like the senators off to the side whose wives are being prostituted.
Which is very funny.
Yeah.
And so again, more cuckolding. This was another thing that is also in the account of Caligula, that he apparently actually did this. The music is also really ominous in this scene, and it makes it really fucking intense. Yeah. And Caligula is fully insane now. And he pretends to conquer Britain. He's talking into a seashell.
He's holding that conch up to his ear the whole time, like he's getting orders in it.
Yes. And he's telling his men to go fight these papyrus plants. And his new advisor is also the crazy brute from prison.
Oh yeah, right by his side.
Yep, he's just really fully descending into madness now. The shell thing, the conch thing, is also in accounts of him. And Caligula seizes everyone's estate, all the senators' estates. And in the end of the movie, Caligula, Caesonia, and their daughter.
So at the end of, I think real quick, the end of that banquet, the banquet when he comes back and he takes away the senator's properties, Caesonia warns him, much like Tiberius warned him at the beginning of the movie, to watch out for Chaerea, who is his new head of the Praetorian Guard. He's being warned. He's being warned again to look out for the head of the guard, and this time, going to the next part.
Yeah, and they're putting on this like play, I guess. Caesonia and Caligula. It's actually really funny because Caesonia is like correcting his movements, his acting, and she's like, "No, you need to do it more like this."
It's the first wholesome scene we've seen of him since like the beginning of the movie.
Yes. And Caligula, Caesonia, and their daughter are assassinated by the head of the Praetorian Guard. And the ending shot, we see Caligula battered and bloody and dead on these steps. And it just like zooms in on his face, dead. And the credits play. And that's Caligula.
That last scene was so gruesome. Like because he's murdered on this giant flight of stairs, and at the end they just push the bodies down the stairs. So he's just laying haphazardly with his dead daughter and wife, and above him there are people cleaning the steps of the blood, literally pushing the spilled blood down the stairs to clean it. So it's gruesome. It's a very gruesome moment. It's really pointed way to end the movie, I think.
Yeah, and that is the entirety of Caligula, all 2 hours and 36 minutes. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you wanted to say about this movie?
We could do so many episodes about Caligula if we had the time. I have a great affinity for any film that haunts you, that sticks with you, that you can't quite shake. And Caligula is one of those movies. it's hard to leave a screening of Caligula or just even a viewing in your home on your laptop and not run through those images over and over in your head, almost haunted by them. And I really appreciate how this movie does that.
Yeah, I agree. It's like I've said, I've seen so much worse since then, but this stands out to me as just one of the most depraved things I've ever seen. And
Yeah.
it's not so much even the content as it is the whole mood of the movie, like the tone. Like there's just no hope in this movie. Like it's so hopeless and disgusting, and
such a dark palette too. Like all the colors are deep reds and gold and black and very deep colors. There's really almost no lightness to it, except in the beginning and end, where you see him wearing like this white toga at the beginning, frolicking with Drusilla, and at the end you see him in Caesonia in these white gowns practicing their play.
Yeah, it's just like dark. It's just dark and gritty, and it's got this very kind of moralistic lens on it, even though it revels in the depravity that it shows. We obviously don't get the sense that this is like a good thing. Anything that's happened in this movie, like you're just kind of left with this deep feeling of like emptiness and just like you feel violated after you watch this. Like it's so it's just like a total assault, and I think that's like the hardcore sex, like coupled with the horrible violence, and not just violence but like actual like literal filth, like dirt and just moisture, and you just feel like you need a shower after this movie.
Oh yeah, in terms of like filth on screen, it definitely gives John Waters a run for his money.
Absolutely.
I'd love to see a quote by John Waters about this movie. He must have seen it and had thoughts.
I'm sure he said something about it, right? Like he has to. And I mean, this movie, I love that it's like the stuff of legends. Like it's to this day like one of the most notorious films of all time. And yeah, I mean, I like it a lot more watching it in retrospect. I think when I first saw it, I was just thinking of it as funny, like, oh, this is so bad it's good. And now I can watch it and sort of just also appreciate the history of it and how it was made. And I mean, also Bob Guccione is a trip, so it's
I would love to learn. There's not, unfortunately, much info about why he set out to do this. I don't know if we mentioned, but he paid for this whole thing out of his own pocket. It ended up being, with interest on loans he took out, it ended up being $22 million in 1979.
Why,
to
Bob?
produce this
why?
movie.
And like, why Caligula? It's so random.
The only thing to me that makes sense is that he just really wanted to make... Well, he had some grandiose idea about making a movie that was in place, but he must have wanted some sort of level of sexual depravity that... I mean, Caligula lends itself to this. The tales of Caligula lend themselves to it so well. And I think he was also inspired by an essay Gore Vidal had written. Gore Vidal had written about Caligula before he ever wrote a screenplay.
That's
about
right.
Because he liked to explore that that absolute power corrupting absolutely idea. In Gore Vidal's original screenplay, Caligula was actually supposed to be like this innocent boy who was overcome by the context of his time and the role that he was meant to take, and it was supposed to show how he was corrupted by the power. Brass ended up revising the script so that Caligula was horrible from the
he's
get-go.
horrible
And that was a
immediately.
really big thing that
With-
yeah. He's a born monster. That was the phrase that they used.
Right. And I personally think that ends up being more interesting than this idea of like this innocent person being corrupted. Like, I find the idea of somebody who's just always been horrible more interesting. So,
I do too.
in a way, like, I don't know. I feel like the movie kind of does what it originally set out to do, even though everybody kind of disavowed it. I think it really does show just absolute excess and filth and like the extent of human cruelty.
Yeah, it's a weird little. It's a weird cinematic artifact, and I still say that it's like super strange that it even made it to theaters at all. Like, there's no actual credited writer for this, which I find hilarious. It's inspired by, I think that the actual quote is that it is, let me see, adapted from an original screenplay by Gore Vidal, and that's the only writing credit the movie gets. There's no one is ever actually credited with writing it, even though like Tinto and Bob Guccione and even Malcolm McDowell had a hand in rewrites. They were all uncredited, and the editing is also credited to the production because it was taken out of Brass's hands at the end. And Guccione had the final say on all of it. That's when Brass disavowed
Didn't you
it.
also say that somebody else had written a script?
Yeah, Lena Wertmuller, who did the what is that movie? The Seduction of Mimi and Seven Beauties. Yeah, German woman filmmaker had written a first draft, but it was rejected. I would love to see what was in that because I would love to see, I'd love to see a woman writing Caligula and see the insights that she would have into this very mythically depraved episode in history.
How fascinating would that be to be able to get your hands on that screenplay?
That would be amazing. That's the kind of thing that like I fantasize about, like the stuff you don't get to see, the stuff that doesn't make it. What are like the early visions of a production? Especially this production, where like the thing that you would finally see, you have no idea whose vision you're looking at, really, other than Bob's.
It's really Bob's. Yeah, it's his movie. I mean, reading in his interview about it. I mean, this is also the funny thing too, is Bob Guccione kind of seems like a Caligula figure. Like, he was so narcissistic. I mean, Penthouse does an interview with him. It's his magazine. And he takes over this entire production in this, like, depraved way. Like, oh, no, there's got to be more sex, more hardcore blowjobs. Like, it's, I don't know, it's very indicative of the time that it was made and the people who made it.
It was. So I've got the interview up. There's this, the question put to him was, Sir John Giglin, one of the world's most distinguished actors, was quoted in a recent interview as saying, "I've just finished my first pornographic film called Caligula. Do you think that's a fair description of the film?" And Guccione responds to a question that I'm sure he wrote himself. "Given the relatively sheltered life that Giglin has lived in terms of motion pictures and his exposure to what's happening in the avant-garde, I would say that he was right, but only if he judged by the context of his own experience and information."
Oh my God. I remember reading that last night, and okay, sure, Bob. I mean, it's like literally hardcore pornography, but also the fact that it was his first pornographic film that he ever saw apparently is interesting. I mean, it just wasn't as readily available as it is now.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think we've, covered a lot of ground here with Caligula.
Yeah, I think we plumbed the depths.
Where can people find you on social media? We talked about it at the top of the show, but if you want to remind people.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at the Video Hole. That's really where I'm primarily active right now. So come check me out. Say hi. Let's talk
Great.
movies.
And as always, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter as Girls Guts Giallo. And you can find my Patreon at patreon.com/girlsgutsgiallo. And thank you for listening. I'll see you next Friday.